The crystal spires of Veltharion stretched toward three purple suns, casting rainbow shadows across the marble plaza where Commander Zexathara stood waiting. Her four arms crossed behind her back in the traditional Draknari pose of authority. The chitinous plates covering her blue skin gleamed in the alien sunlight as she watched the shuttle approach. Today would bring news of the latest conquest, another primitive world added to the ever-growing Draknari Empire. The shuttle landed with barely a whisper, its advanced technology making no sound as it touched the polished stone. From it stepped Captain Lisa Martinez, a human diplomat whose brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore the plain blue uniform of the United Earth Service, looking small and fragile next to the towering Draknari architecture. Behind her came two other humans, equally unremarkable in Zexathara's eyes, but it was the third figure emerging from the shuttle that made the commander pause. Lady Morgana Silverleaf moved with the fluid grace of someone who had lived for centuries. Her silver hair caught the light like spun metal, and her violet eyes held depths that spoke of ancient wisdom. The elf wore simple robes of deep green, yet somehow commanded more respect than any military uniform. Zexathara had heard of the Elven Conclave, the neutral faction that occasionally involved itself in galactic affairs. They were old, perhaps, the oldest spacefaring race known, but they kept to themselves mostly. What could possibly bring one of their representatives here now? Captain Martinez stepped forward first, her voice steady despite being surrounded by alien architecture and guards twice her size. Commander Zexathara, I come representing the United Earth Government. We wish to discuss the recent incidents in the border sectors. The Draknari commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Incidents. You mean the rightful expansion of Draknari territory into unclaimed space. Your merchant vessels were trespassing. Those were established trade routes, Martinez replied calmly. Our ships carried medical supplies to the colony worlds. Families depend on those shipments. Zexathara waved one of her four hands dismissively. The strong take what they need. The weak learn to adapt or perish. This is the way of the galaxy. Lady Morgana stepped forward then, her ancient voice carrying easily across the plaza. Commander, might I request a private audience? There are matters we should discuss before any decisions are made. Something in the elf's tone made Zexathara curious, despite herself. The Elven Conclave rarely involved itself in territorial disputes. Very well. Captain Martinez, you and your companions will wait here under guard. Lady Silverleaf, you may accompany me to the council chamber. The two females walked through corridors lined with trophies from 1,000 conquered worlds. Weapons, artwork, and artifacts from dozens of species lined the walls like a museum of defeat. Morgana's expression remained neutral, but her violet eyes took in every detail. In the private council chamber, Zexathara settled her large frame into the commander's chair while Morgana remained standing. Speak, elf. What brings the conclave to Draknari space? Morgana's voice was soft but carried weight. I come to warn you about the humans, Commander. Your empire stands at a crossroads, and the path you choose will determine whether it survives the next decade. The Draknari's compound eyes narrowed. Warn me? About those soft mammals? They have barely left their home system. Their technology is primitive. Their ships are slow and clumsy. What possible threat could they pose to an empire that spans 3 sectors? Appearances can be deceiving, Morgana replied. The Elven Conclave has observed humanity for over 800 years. We have records, Commander. Records of what happens when humans are pushed too far. Zexathara's mandibles clicked again, this time in open mockery. Share these records, then. Amuse me with tales of human ferocity. Morgana touched a small device at her belt, and holographic images filled the air. Between them, scenes of devastation played out in miniature, showing burned worlds and shattered fleets. This was the Hegemony War, 4 centuries ago. The Altaran Hegemony made the same mistake you are making now. They saw humans as weak because they preferred negotiation to conquest. The images showed human ships, primitive by current standards, engaging in desperate battles against overwhelming odds. But there was something disturbing about the way they fought. They never retreated, never surrendered, even when defeat was certain. The Alterons captured human worlds, enslaved human populations, dismissed human warnings, Morgana continued. They thought themselves invincible, just as you do now. Within 5 years, their 1,000-year empire was ash and memory. Zexthara studied the images with growing interest rather than concern. These ships are ancient. Human technology has not advanced significantly since then. Our weapons are superior, our armor stronger, our numbers greater. You miss the point entirely, Morgana said sadly. Technology is not what makes humans dangerous. It is their nature. When you corner most species, they submit or flee. When you corner a human, they become something else entirely. Something that will burn down everything, including themselves, rather than accept defeat. The Draknari commander stood, her full height making her tower over the elf. You speak of fear, Lady Silverleaf. The Draknari know no fear. We have conquered the fierce Krillian hives, the warrior clans of Zephyria, the machine intelligence of Nexus Prime. What makes you think these humans are any different? Morgana's violet eyes grew distant, as if seeing into the past. Because I was there, Commander. I watched the Alteran fleet burn in the skies above their homeworld. I saw what humans become when they decide that survival requires absolute victory. The Elven Conclave records everything, remembers everything. We remember the sound human warriors make when they charge into certain death. We remember the look in their eyes when they realize their children are threatened. Poetry and sentiment. Zexthara dismissed. The Draknari deal in reality. Human Captain Martinez waits outside with her pathetic delegation, offering trade agreements and territorial compromises. They seek to negotiate because they know they cannot fight. This proves their weakness. It proves their wisdom, Morgana corrected. They offer you a chance to avoid the fate of every empire that has underestimated them. But I see that wisdom is not valued here. The commander's 4 hands clenched into fists. The Draknari Empire spans 47 star systems. Our fleets number in the thousands. Our armies have never known defeat. If these humans wish to stand in our way, they will learn what happens to obstacles that block Draknari expansion. Morgana bowed her head slightly. Then you have chosen your path, Commander. I will return to Captain Martinez now and inform her that negotiations have failed. But before I do, I will share one final piece of advice. Speak quickly. My patience wears thin. The ancient elf looked directly into Zexthara's compound eyes. When the human fleets come, and they will come, remember this conversation. Remember that you were warned. Remember that you chose this path when you could have chosen peace. And when your empire burns, as it surely will, remember that an old elf tried to save you from yourselves. Zexthara's laughter echoed through the chamber. When their fleets come, let them come. The galaxy will witness the price of challenging Draknari might. These humans will learn the meaning of true power. Outside in the plaza, Captain Martinez waited patiently as Lady Morgana emerged from the palace. The elf's expression told her everything she needed to know about how the private conversation had gone. I am sorry, Captain, Morgana said quietly. I tried to make them understand, but their pride blinds them to reality. Your government should prepare for war. Martinez nodded grimly. We hoped for peace, but we're not naive. Humanity has contingency plans. As the human delegation prepared to depart, Zexthara appeared on a high balcony overlooking the plaza. Her voice carried across the space with mechanical amplification. Tell your leaders that the Draknari Empire claims all systems within 50 light-years of our borders. Any human presence in those regions will be considered an act of war. Captain, Martinez looked up at the alien commander. And you tell your Empress that humanity tried to extend the hand of friendship. What happens next is entirely your choice. The shuttle lifted off, carrying the human diplomats and the ancient elf back toward the stars. Zexthara watched it go with satisfaction. Soon the Empire would expand again, and these presumptuous humans would learn their place in the galactic order. Lady Morgana stared out the shuttle's viewport at the receding world. She had seen this before, the arrogance that came before the fall. In her long life, she had watched mighty empires crumble because they could not recognize the difference between patience and weakness. The Draknari would learn, but the lesson would cost them everything they had built. The first shots of the war had not yet been fired, but the outcome was already written in the stars. The red alarm lights bathed the bridge of the UES Harmony in crimson as Captain Lisa Martinez studied the tactical display. 3 days had passed since her failed diplomatic mission to Veltharion, and now Draknari warships were moving toward human space. The colony world of Kepler 442b lay directly in their path, home to 12,000 human settlers who had spent the last decade turning barren rock into fertile farmland. Admiral Kate Morrison's face appeared on the main screen, her gray hair pulled back severely, and her blue eyes hard as steel. "Captain Martinez, your orders are to evacuate as many civilians as possible from Kepler 442b. The Draknari fleet will reach the system in 18 hours. "What about the colony itself?" Martinez asked. "These people have built their entire lives there. The settlers have voted to stay and defend their homes," Morrison replied. "We're sending what support we can, but our main fleet is still 2 days out. You'll have to hold the line with whatever's available locally." The transmission ended, leaving Martinez to contemplate the impossible task ahead. The colony had minimal defenses, just a few converted cargo ships with basic weapons and a handful of former military personnel among the settlers. Against a full Draknari battle group, they stood no chance in conventional warfare. On Kepler 442b, Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked frantically in her makeshift laboratory. As the colony's chief scientist, she had spent years studying the planet's unique mineral deposits. Now she was racing to weaponize everything she had learned. The Draknari might have superior technology, but they knew nothing about human ingenuity, born from desperation. "Tom, bring me those mining charges," she called to her assistant, "and gather all the fertilizer from the agricultural domes. If we're going to fight, we need every advantage we can create." The colony's leader, a former Marine named Jake Williams, coordinated the defense from the central command post. His weathered hands moved across holographic displays showing the positions of armed civilians throughout the settlement. These were farmers and engineers, teachers and shopkeepers, but every one of them had chosen to stand and fight rather than abandon their world. "Remember, we're not trying to win a pitched battle," Williams addressed the assembled defenders over the communications network. "We make them pay for every meter of ground. We use the terrain, we use surprise, and we make them understand that taking this world will cost them more than they bargained for." Light years away, Princess Lyrelay Moon Whisper sat in her private chambers aboard the elven observation vessel, Silver Wind. As Lady Morgana's apprentice, she had been granted permission to observe the coming conflict. At barely 200 years old, she was young by elven standards, and her mentor hoped this experience would teach her about the realities of galactic politics. "Why do the humans choose to fight when they cannot win?" she asked Lady Morgana, who stood gazing out at the stars. "Because winning is not always the point, child," the ancient elf replied. "Sometimes the act of resistance itself matters more than victory. The humans understand something that most species do not. Every battle teaches lessons even in defeat, especially in defeat." The Draknari fleet dropped out of hyperspace right on schedule, their massive ships bristling with weapons and armor. Commander Zexathara stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Stellar Dominance, as her sensors revealed the pathetic defenses awaiting them below. A few converted civilian vessels, improvised weapon emplacements, and scattered settlements across the planet's surface. "This will be over within the hour," she announced to her bridge crew. "Begin orbital bombardment of military targets. Leave the civilians alive to witness Draknari power, then demand their surrender." The first energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking the colony's power plant and communications array. Explosions bloomed across the settlement as the humans scrambled for cover. But instead of cowering in terror, they began to fight back with whatever weapons they could deploy. Dr. Rodriguez had spent the previous night rigging every vehicle in the colony with explosive devices. Now, as Draknari dropships descended toward the surface, seemingly harmless farm equipment suddenly erupted in carefully timed detonations. The enemy landing craft, expecting to face desperate civilians with small arms, instead found themselves under assault from modified mining equipment and agricultural machinery turned into improvised weapons. Captain Martinez arrived with the UES Harmony just as the first Draknari troops made planetfall. Her ship was no match for the alien battle cruisers in direct combat, but she had not come to fight fairly. Using the planet's magnetic field and atmospheric interference, she played a deadly game of hide-and-seek among the floating debris of destroyed orbital facilities. "Target their communications array," she ordered her weapons officer. "Make them fight blind." The Harmony's missiles found their mark, severing the command links between the Draknari fleet and their ground forces. Suddenly, the perfectly coordinated assault became a confused mess of individual units acting without proper support or information. On the surface, Jake Williams led his farmers and shopkeepers in a guerrilla campaign that defied everything the Draknari knew about warfare. The humans did not mass their forces for defensive stands. Instead, they scattered into small groups that struck without warning and disappeared into the planet's complex cave systems and underground tunnels. "They fight like vermin," one Draknari officer complained over the radio before his position was overrun by colonists wielding improvised explosive devices. Princess Liralai watched the battle unfold through her ship's sensors, her young mind struggling to understand what she was seeing. "The humans are losing," she observed. "Their casualties are mounting. Their equipment is being destroyed. Yet they continue to fight with increasing ferocity." Lady Morgana nodded thoughtfully. "Now you begin to see what makes them dangerous. Each loss makes them angrier, not weaker. Each defeat teaches them new ways to hurt their enemies. Watch how they adapt." Indeed, the human tactics were evolving even as the battle raged. Dr. Rodriguez had discovered that Draknari equipment was vulnerable to certain electromagnetic frequencies generated by the planet's unique mineral deposits. Within hours, she had jury-rigged devices that could disable enemy weapons and vehicles from considerable distances. Commander Zexathara found herself growing increasingly frustrated as the simple conquest turned into a protracted siege. Her superior firepower was useless against enemies who refused to present proper targets. Her advanced technology was being countered by primitive solutions that should not have worked but somehow did. "Sir, we've lost contact with Landing Group 7, reported her communications officer. "Their last transmission indicated they were under attack by farm animals?" The report was accurate. The colonists had weaponized everything, including the livestock. Cattle and horses fitted with explosive packs were being used as living missiles against Draknari positions. It was insane, desperate, and utterly effective. Admiral Morrison arrived, with the human relief fleet 36 hours later than planned, expecting to find either a devastated colony or a successful Draknari occupation. Instead, she discovered a stalemate that had cost the aliens far more than they had anticipated. The Draknari still controlled most of the planet's surface, but their forces were scattered, demoralized, and taking constant casualties from an enemy they could barely comprehend. "Captain Martinez, report!" Morrison commanded as the Harmony limped toward the approaching human fleet. "The colony is still fighting, Admiral. Casualties are heavy, but they've made the Draknari pay for every meter. Dr. Rodriguez has developed countermeasures against their technology, and the civilian defenders have proven remarkably creative in their resistance methods." Morrison studied the tactical display, noting the scattered positions of Draknari forces and the ongoing skirmishes across the planet's surface. This was not how civilized warfare was supposed to proceed. There should have been clear battle lines, formal surrenders, proper military protocol. Instead, she was looking at chaos. "Signal the Draknari flagship," she ordered. "Offer them one chance to withdraw before this gets out of hand." "Commander." Zexathara received the human transmission with disbelief and rage. "You dare threaten me? Look at your pathetic colony burning below us. We hold this world." "You hold dirt and rock," Morrison replied calmly. "The people are still fighting. The infrastructure is destroyed. The resources you came to claim are worthless now. Cut your losses, Commander. Withdraw while you still can." The Draknari response was predictable. Energy beams lanced out toward the human fleet, beginning the first proper space battle between the two species. But Admiral Morrison had not come to fight a conventional engagement either. Her ships scattered into loose formations, using the same hit-and-run tactics that had proven so effective on the planet's surface. Princess Liralai gasped as she watched human vessels seemingly sacrifice themselves to deliver crippling blows to much larger Draknari ships. "They're ramming the enemy vessels," she reported to Lady Morgana. "They're destroying themselves to win." "No, child. the ancient elf corrected. "They're teaching the Draknari a lesson. Every human ship that dies takes a piece of alien fleet with it. Every colonist who falls makes the Draknari pay in blood and resources. The humans are not trying to win this battle. They're demonstrating the cost of fighting them." The battle for Kepler 442b lasted 3 more days. When it finally ended, the Draknari had achieved a technical victory. They controlled the ruined colony and the surrounding space. But the cost had been staggering. Nearly half their invasion fleet was destroyed or severely damaged. Thousands of elite Draknari soldiers lay dead on a world that was supposed to surrender. Without significant resistance, Commander Zexathara stood among the smoking ruins of what had once been a thriving human settlement. The survivors had finally been rounded up, but their eyes showed no defeat, only cold calculation. Even in captivity, they were studying their captors, learning, planning. "This was just one small colony," Captain Martinez said quietly as she was led past the Draknari commander. "Wait until you see what we do when you threaten our core worlds." For the first time since the campaign began, Zexathara felt a chill run through her chitinous plates. The humans had lost everything here, yet somehow she felt like she had been the one defeated. This victory tasted of ash and blood, and she suspected it was only the beginning of a much larger and more terrible war. High above, Princess Lyrale recorded her observations for the Elven Conclave archives. Lady Morgana's warnings had been proven correct once again, but the lesson was just beginning. The humans had shown remarkable resilience in defeat, but what would they do now that they had been truly provoked? The galaxy was about to find out. The emergency session of the United Earth Congress convened in the underground bunkers beneath Geneva, where representatives from every human world gathered via hologram. The images of Kepler 442b still burned. Fresh in everyone's minds, 12,000 colonists dead or captured, their homes reduced to ash, their dreams trampled under alien boots. The chamber buzzed with angry voices demanding action, demanding revenge, demanding war. General Amy Thompson stood at the central podium, her uniform bearing the scars of 30 years of military service. Her brown hair was streaked with gray, and her green eyes held the kind of cold fury that came from watching good people die for no reason other than alien arrogance. She had been recalled from retirement for this moment, and everyone in the chamber knew what that meant. Ladies and gentlemen, Thompson's voice cut through the noise like a blade. High Empress Vorthagal of the Draknari Empire has just broadcast a message across all galactic frequencies. She declares that humanity is now considered a hostile species to be conquered or eliminated. She claims that human resistance to their expansion proves we are unfit to share the galaxy with civilized races. The chamber erupted in outrage, but Thompson raised her hand for silence. "The Empress has given us one standard week to surrender all human colonies outside our home system. If we refuse, she promises to demonstrate the full might of the Draknari Empire against Earth itself." President Sarah Collins, elected leader of the United Earth government, stepped forward. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled with suppressed emotion. "General Thompson, I am invoking Emergency Protocol 7. All civilian oversight of military operations is hereby suspended. You have unlimited authority to defend humanity by any means necessary. In the depths of space, aboard the Elven observation vessel, Silver Wind, Princess Lyrale Moonwhisper watched the human broadcasts with growing fascination and horror. She had never seen an entire species transform itself so rapidly. Within hours of the Draknari ultimatum, every human world was mobilizing for total war. "Lady Morgana," she called to her mentor, "what are we witnessing? This is not the same species we observed during the colony battle." The ancient elf joined her apprentice at the observation deck, her violet eyes reflecting the light of distant stars. "You are seeing humanity shed its peaceful facade, child. This is what happens when they stop trying to coexist and start trying to survive. Every human world is now a weapon factory. Every human citizen is now a soldier. Every human ship is now a warship." The transformation was indeed remarkable. On Earth, massive industrial complexes that had produced consumer goods for centuries were retooled overnight to manufacture weapons and starships. University laboratories became research centers for military technology. Peaceful trade routes became supply lines for an expanding war machine. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, recently rescued from Draknari captivity, found herself leading a classified project in the Colorado Rockies. Her experience reverse engineering alien technology during the siege had made her invaluable to the war effort. Now she had unlimited resources and a team of the brightest minds humanity could assemble. "Show me everything we captured from Kepler 442b, she ordered her staff. "Every piece of Draknari equipment, every weapon fragment, every data crystal. If we're going to fight them, we need to understand them completely." The research proceeded at an impossible pace. Human scientists worked in shifts around the clock, driven by the knowledge that their entire species faced extinction. They dissected Draknari technology with the same methodical precision that had once been applied to curing diseases and exploring space. But now their goal was not healing or discovery. It was warfare. Admiral Kate Morrison stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching displays that showed the mobilization of the largest fleet in human history. Ships were being pulled from every corner of human space, from exploration vessels, converted to carry weapons to massive cargo haulers fitted with armor and missile systems. It was not elegant or efficient, but it was growing larger by the hour. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving volunteer registrations faster than we can process them. Every human colony wants to send ships and crews to join the fleet." Morrison nodded grimly. She had seen this before, though never on such a scale. When humans felt threatened as a species, they set aside every difference and united with terrifying efficiency. Age, gender, profession, political affiliation, nothing mattered anymore except the survival of humanity. On the Draknari homeworld of Veltharion, High Empress Vortha Gal reviewed intelligence reports from her conquered territories. The humans had not responded to her ultimatum with surrender or negotiation. Instead, they had gone completely silent. No communications, no diplomatic overtures, nothing but ominous military buildup across all their worlds. "Your Majesty," Commander Zexthera reported via hologram from her flagship, "human fleet movements suggest they are massing for a major offensive. But their formations make no tactical sense. They appear to be scattering their forces rather than concentrating them." The High Empress was a creature of ancient malice, her form more insectoid than her subordinates. Multiple eyes studied the tactical displays, while her needle-sharp mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "They are primitives trying to appear threatening. Begin Phase 2 of our expansion. Crush their remaining colonies one by one until they learn proper submission." But Zexithara had been at Kepler 442b. She had seen what humans did when they were cornered. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should reconsider. The humans demonstrated unexpected capabilities during the colony siege. Their resistance was far more costly than anticipated." "You disappoint me, Commander." Vorthagal's voice dripped with contempt. "Have we become so weak that we fear mammals who have barely learned to leave their homeworld? The Draknari Empire has conquered 1,000 species. These humans will be no different." Princess Lirelei had been studying human historical records for days, trying to understand what made them so different from other species. The Elven archives contained detailed observations of human conflicts spanning centuries, and a disturbing pattern emerged from the data. "Lady Morgana," she said, looking up from her research, "I think I understand now why you warned the Draknari. Humans do not fight wars the way other species do. They do not seek victory through superior force or tactical brilliance. They seek to make war itself too costly for their enemies to continue." The ancient elf smiled sadly. "You begin to learn, young one. Other species fight until they achieve their objectives, or until continued fighting becomes unprofitable. Humans fight until their enemies no longer exist as a threat. They understand that the only way to truly end a war is to make their enemies incapable of starting another one." General Thompson's war plans were unlike anything seen in modern galactic conflict. Rather than concentrating human forces for major battles, she dispersed them across dozens of star systems. Every human fleet was independent, capable of sustained operations without support from Earth. Every ship carried enough firepower to threaten entire worlds. The strategy was simple and terrifying in its implications. Humanity would not defend fixed positions or try to hold territory. Instead, they would attack everything the Draknari valued simultaneously: infrastructure, supply lines, communication networks, civilian populations, nothing would be considered off-limits once the war truly began. "We are not trying to defeat their military," Thompson explained to her senior officers. "We are trying to destroy their ability to maintain an empire. Every Draknari world will burn, every Draknari ship will be hunted, every Draknari citizen will learn to fear the night because that is when the humans come." Dr. Rodriguez made her breakthrough on the 5th day after the ultimatum. Draknari technology relied on quantum field manipulation for both propulsion and weapons systems. But the fields could be destabilized using specific harmonic frequencies. More importantly, the destabilization could be triggered remotely and would cascade through any connected systems. "We can turn their own technology against them," she reported to General Thompson. "Every Draknari ship, every weapon, every piece of equipment becomes a potential bomb when exposed to the right frequency burst. They built their empire using this technology. We can use it to tear them apart." The countdown to the Draknari deadline continued. But humanity was no longer the same species that had tried to negotiate peace just days earlier. Admiral Morrison's fleets were already moving toward their targets. Dr. Rodriguez's weapons were being mass-produced and distributed. General Thompson's strategy was being implemented across every human world. Princess Lyrelei watched the final preparations with growing dread. "Lady Morgana, should we not warn the Draknari about what is coming? This will be a massacre." "I tried to warn them, child," Morgana replied. "They chose to ignore wisdom in favor of arrogance. Now they will learn why the Elven Conclave chose neutrality over alliance with humanity. We knew that someday we might need to choose between being their friends or their enemies. We chose to be neither. The human fleets reached their jumping off points hours before the Draknari deadline expired. Across dozens of star systems, human ships waited in the darkness between worlds, their crews making final preparations for what would come next. They carried no flags or banners, no symbols of national pride or military tradition. They carried only the cold determination of a species that had been pushed beyond the point of reason. High Empress Vorthogol prepared her final ultimatum broadcast, confident that the humans would finally submit when faced with the full might of the Draknari Empire. She had no way of knowing that humanity had already made its choice. There would be no surrender, no negotiation, no mercy. Captain Lisa Martinez, recently promoted to command her own ship, the UES Retribution, received her final orders from Admiral Morrison. "Captain, your target is the Draknari naval base at Kethmoran. Destroy everything. Leave nothing that can be repaired or salvaged." "Understood, Admiral," Martinez replied. "What about civilian casualties?" "The Draknari made their choice when they murdered 12,000 human colonists." Morrison's voice was ice cold. "Show them the same mercy they showed our people." The deadline approached. Princess Lyrelei made one final observation for the Elven archives. "The humans are no longer fighting for territory or resources. They are fighting for the right to exist as a free species. The Draknari Empire wanted to add humanity to their list of conquered races. Instead, they have created something far more dangerous. They have created a species with nothing left to lose." The deadline passed without human surrender. High Empress Vorthogol began her invasion fleet's final approach toward Earth, confident in her superiority. She had no way of knowing that at that exact moment, human ships were dropping out of hyperspace in 47 different star systems, all of them deep within Draknari territory. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity stopped being civilized. The first reports reached High Empress Vorthogol as her invasion fleet approached the Sol system. Her communications officer's voice trembled with disbelief as she delivered the impossible news. "Your Majesty, we are receiving distress calls from 17 different star systems. Human fleets have appeared simultaneously across the Empire. They are attacking everything." Vorthogol's multiple eyes focused on the tactical displays showing the scope of the human offensive. Red warning symbols marked attacks on mining worlds, supply depots, communication relay stations, and civilian shipping lanes. The humans were not targeting military strongholds or trying to capture territory. They were systematically destroying the infrastructure that held the Draknari Empire together. "This is impossible," she hissed through needle-sharp mandibles. "How could they coordinate attacks across such vast distances? Their technology is primitive. Their ships are slow. The answer came from Commander Zexathara, whose voice carried a note of growing panic. Your Majesty, the human ships are not using conventional faster-than-light drives. They appear to have developed some form of quantum tunneling technology that allows near-instantaneous travel between predetermined coordinates. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's breakthrough had been even more revolutionary than anyone realized. By studying captured Draknari technology, human scientists had learned to manipulate the same quantum fields that powered alien starships. But instead of copying the alien approach, they had improved upon it, creating jump drives that could move entire fleets across the galaxy in minutes rather than days. Captain Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution as her ship materialized. In the Kethmoran system, the Draknari naval base sprawled across 3 asteroid clusters, its massive construction yards protected by energy shields and orbital defense platforms. It was the primary shipbuilding facility for the eastern sectors of the Draknari Empire. All ships commence attack pattern Omega, Martinez commanded. Remember, we are not here to capture anything. We are here to ensure that nothing useful remains. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that should not have existed. Dr. Rodriguez's harmonic destabilization technology turned Draknari shields and armor into weapons against themselves. Energy barriers collapsed, sending feedback surges through power systems. Armor plating vibrated itself apart at the molecular level. Ships that had seemed invincible just hours before were tearing themselves apart from within. On the elven observation vessel Silver Wind, Princess Lyrelai watched the coordinated destruction with growing horror. Lady Morgana, they are not just attacking military targets. They are destroying civilian infrastructure, trade centers, even agricultural worlds. The ancient elf's expression was grim as she observed the scope of human warfare. The humans have studied Draknari society thoroughly, child. They understand that the Empire's strength comes from its interconnected nature. Remove enough supporting elements, and the entire structure collapses. Indeed, General Amy Thompson's strategy was proving devastatingly effective. Human fleets struck at precisely chosen targets that would create cascading failures throughout Draknari space. Communication networks went dark, leaving remote worlds isolated and unable to call for help. Supply lines were severed, stranding military units without fuel or ammunition. Industrial centers were reduced to rubble, ending the Empire's ability to replace losses. Admiral Kate Morrison commanded the assault on the central Draknari fortress world of Nexus 7. Her fleet of converted civilian vessels faced defense, platforms that had never been defeated in 3 centuries of warfare. But the humans did not attack with conventional tactics. Instead, they used the planet's own orbital infrastructure against it. Target the cargo processing stations, Morrison ordered. Use their own shipping containers as kinetic weapons. Human ships seized control of the massive cargo haulers that constantly moved supplies between the surface and orbital facilities. These vessels, each carrying thousands of tons of raw materials, were redirected into collision courses with defense, platforms, and military installations. The Draknari defenders found themselves under attack from their own logistics network. Commander Zexathara witnessed the fall of Nexus 7 from her flagship, which was trapped in the system by human interdiction. Fields. She watched helplessly as civilian cargo ships became weapons of mass destruction, smashing through defenses that had withstood siege warfare for generations. The humans had turned the Empire's greatest strength, its efficient supply network, into its greatest weakness. "This is not warfare," she whispered to her bridge crew. "This is systematic extermination." The truth of her words became apparent as reports continued to flood in from across Draknari space. The humans were not seeking to occupy conquered territory or negotiate favorable terms. They were methodically dismantling every aspect of Draknari civilization. Shipyards burned, factories exploded, communication arrays went silent, and trade routes became death traps patrolled by human vessels. High Empress Vortha Gal realized, too late, that she had committed the classic blunder of fighting the last war. She had expected human resistance to follow conventional patterns, with clear objectives and rational limitations. Instead, she faced an enemy that seemed determined to destroy everything rather than allow the Draknari Empire to continue existing. "Recall all fleets," she commanded. Abandon the invasion of human space. We must defend our core worlds. But the recall order never reached most of her forces. Human attacks had severed the communication networks that linked the far-flung empire together. Draknari fleets found themselves isolated in deep space, cut off from commands and supplies, while human forces struck at will throughout their former territory. Princess Lyrelai had been monitoring human communications channels, trying to understand their methods and motivations. What she discovered chilled her to the core. Lady Morgana, the humans are not just destroying Draknari military assets. They are systematically eliminating the Empire's ability to maintain technological civilization. They are forcing an entire species back to a pre-industrial state. Lady Morgana nodded sadly. This is what I tried to warn Commander Zexathara about. When humans decide that a threat must be eliminated, they do not stop at defeating armies or conquering territory. They remove the threat's ability to ever pose a danger again. The Draknari Empire will not recover from this, child. It cannot recover from this. The effectiveness of the human campaign became clear as the third day of fighting ended. 47 star systems had been attacked simultaneously. 60% of Draknari industrial capacity had been destroyed or severely damaged. The Empire's communication networks were in ruins. Military units were scattered and unable to coordinate responses. Dr. Rodriguez continued to develop new weapons even as the existing ones proved devastatingly effective. Her laboratories worked around the clock to create tools specifically designed to exploit Draknari weaknesses, quantum viruses that could spread through their computer networks, harmonic weapons that could shatter their crystalline architecture, biological agents that could contaminate their food supplies. The goal is not just victory, she explained to her research teams. The goal is to ensure that they never threaten humanity again. We need to remove their capability to wage interstellar warfare permanently. Captain Martinez received new orders as her fleet finished reducing the Kethmaran shipyards to scrap metal. Proceed to the Veltharian system. Primary target is the Imperial Palace. Secondary targets are all government facilities and administrative centers. The attack on the Draknari homeworld began at dawn on the fourth day of the war. Human ships materialized in orbit around Veltharian, their weapons trained on the crystal spires that had symbolized empire for 1,000 years. But they did not immediately open fire. Instead, Admiral Morrison transmitted a message directly to High Empress Vorthagal. Your Majesty, you have one opportunity to prevent the complete destruction of your homeworld. Order the immediate and unconditional surrender of all Draknari forces. Release all human prisoners. Withdraw all claims to human territory. Do this now, and your people will be allowed to survive on their homeworld under human oversight. The response was swift and filled with rage. Never! The Draknari Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. We will fight to the last warrior before accepting subjugation by mammals. Morrison's reply was calm and final. Then your empire ends today. The bombardment of Veltharian was precise and merciless. Human weapons, enhanced by Dr. Rodriguez's technology, targeted every symbol of imperial power. The crystal spires that had stood for millennia crumbled to dust. Government. Buildings vaporized under directed energy beams. Military installations disappeared in expanding fireballs. Commander Zexathara found herself trapped in the ruins of her former headquarters, surrounded by the wreckage of an empire that had seemed invincible just days before. Her communicator crackled with desperate transmissions from scattered Draknari units, all asking the same question. How had this happened? How had a primitive species brought down a galactic empire in less than a week? Princess Lyrelai recorded her observations as the bombardment continued. The humans are demonstrating something unprecedented in galactic history. They are showing that technological superiority and military tradition mean nothing against an enemy willing to sacrifice everything to achieve victory. The Draknari Empire's strength came from its ability to intimidate other species into submission. But intimidation only works against those who fear death more than slavery. The siege of Veltharian lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Draknari homeworld was a shadow of its former self. The magnificent capital city lay in ruins. The imperial palace was a crater half a mile wide. The orbital shipyards were twisted metal drifting in space. Most importantly, the infrastructure that had allowed the Draknari to maintain their empire was gone forever. High Empress Vorth Agal emerged from her bunker complex to find human soldiers waiting for her. Captain Martinez led the delegation that would accept her surrender, her expression as cold as the space between stars. The woman who had once tried to negotiate peace now held the fate of an entire species in her hands. "Your empire is finished," Martinez stated simply. "Your fleets are scattered or destroyed. Your worlds are isolated and defenseless. Your technology has been turned against you. You have two choices: surrender unconditionally and accept human administration of your remaining territories, or watch your species become extinct." The proud empress, who had ruled 47 star systems, looked around at the ruins of her capital city. Smoke rose from 1,000 fires. Her subjects wandered the rubble in shock and despair. The great empire that had lasted for centuries was gone, destroyed in less than a week by a species she had dismissed as primitive mammals. "I surrender," she whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Lady Morgana arrived on Veltharion as the surrender ceremony concluded. She walked through the ruins with Princess Lyrelay, showing her apprentice the price of underestimating humanity. "Remember this day, child. Remember what happens when peaceful people are pushed beyond the point of reason. The humans offered friendship, and it was rejected. They offered negotiation, and it was spurned. They offered mercy, and it was scorned. This is what remains when diplomacy fails." The Draknari Empire, which had conquered 1,000 worlds and enslaved countless species, had been reduced to a collection of isolated planets under human occupation. The lesson was clear for any species with the wisdom to learn it. Humanity could be the galaxy's greatest ally or its most terrible enemy. The choice belonged to those who encountered them. But some lessons could only be learned through experience, and experience could be a very harsh teacher indeed. 6 months after the fall of the Draknari Empire, Captain Lisa Martinez walked through the reconstructed streets of New Veltharion. The human administration had rebuilt the former imperial capital as a functional city rather than a monument to conquest. Gone were the crystal spires that had symbolized alien supremacy. In their place stood practical buildings designed for the needs of the population rather than the glory of their rulers. The transformation was remarkable. Draknari civilians who had once lived in the shadow of imperial palaces now worked alongside human engineers and administrators to create something entirely new. The rigid caste system that had defined their society for millennia was being slowly dismantled, replaced by merit-based opportunities that would have been unthinkable under the old regime. Martinez paused outside the former imperial palace, now converted into a humanitarian aid center. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had established medical facilities there, using her knowledge of alien physiology to treat injuries and diseases that had been ignored under imperial rule. The irony was not lost on anyone. The species that had destroyed the empire was now working to heal its people. "Captain Martinez," a familiar voice called from behind her. She turned to see Commander Zexathara approaching, though the former Draknari military leader looked very different now. Gone was the elaborate armor and ceremonial weapons. Instead, she wore simple work clothes and carried a data tablet containing construction schedules for the city's new water treatment facility. "Commander," Martinez acknowledged with a slight nod. "How is the infrastructure project progressing?" Zexathara's mandibles clicked in what had once been a gesture of amusement, but now seemed tinged with sadness. "Better than expected. Your engineers have taught us construction techniques that are far more efficient than our old methods. The city will have clean water and reliable power within another month." The conversation was civil, professional, and completely impossible under the old imperial system. The idea of a Draknari military commander discussing municipal engineering with a human officer would have been inconceivable just months before. Now it was simply part of the new reality. General Amy Thompson had retired again after the wars, but not before overseeing the transition from conquest to occupation. Her final reports painted a picture of systematic change that went far beyond military victory. The humans were not just administering former Draknari territory. They were transforming it into something fundamentally different. The goal was never to rule over them, Thompson had explained to the United Earth Congress. The goal was to ensure they could never threaten us again. The best way to do that is to help them build a society that has no interest in conquest or expansion. The results spoke for themselves. Former Draknari military installations had been converted into schools and hospitals. Weapons factories now produced agricultural equipment and consumer goods. The massive fleets that had once terrorized neighboring systems were being recycled into cargo vessels and exploration ships. Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of her flagship, observing the peaceful traffic moving through what had once been the most heavily fortified system in Draknari space. Merchant vessels from dozens of species now traded freely in markets that had been closed to outsiders for centuries. The iron grip of imperial control had been replaced by the gentle guidance of human administration. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Elven Conclave. Lady Morgana requests permission to visit the system." Morrison smiled slightly. The ancient elf had been notably absent during the war itself, but her warnings had proven accurate in every detail. "Grant her request. I think she'll find the situation interesting." The elven vessel Silver Wind arrived 2 days later, carrying both Lady Morgana and Princess Lyrelay. The younger elf had spent the months since the war studying human behavior patterns, trying to understand how a species could be simultaneously so destructive and so constructive. Lady Morgana met with Captain Martinez in the former Imperial throne room, now converted into a conference center where representatives from various worlds gathered to discuss trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. The symbolism was intentional and powerful. Where once a single tyrant had decreed the fate of billions, now multiple voices worked together to build something better. "Captain Martinez," Lady Morgana said, settling gracefully into a chair designed for human rather than Draknari physiology, "I must admit that the transformation here has exceeded even my expectations. When I warned Commander Zexathera about your species, I anticipated destruction. I did not anticipate reconstruction." Martinez poured tea for both of them, a simple gesture that would have been impossible in the old Imperial Palace. "We learned long ago that destroying something is only half the job, Lady Morgana. If you don't build something better in its place, you'll just end up fighting the same war again later." Princess Lyrelay joined them, her young face showing the wisdom that came from witnessing the rise and fall of empires. "Captain, I have been studying your species' approach to what you call nation building. It seems to involve sharing power rather than consolidating it. Why do you choose to weaken your own authority?" The question was perceptive, and Martinez took a moment to consider her answer. "Because strong authority built on fear and suppression eventually collapses, as we just witnessed. But authority built on cooperation and mutual benefit can last for generations. We're not trying to rule the former Draknari worlds. We're trying to help them rule themselves in a way that benefits everyone." Dr. Rodriguez had been working on a different kind of reconstruction project. Her laboratories now focused on healing rather than destruction, developing medical technologies that combined human innovation with Draknari biological knowledge. The same scientific brilliance that had created weapons capable of destroying an empire was now being used to extend life and reduce suffering. "The key insight," she explained to her mixed team of human and Draknari researchers, "is that cooperation produces better results than domination. We learned more about Draknari physiology in the last 6 months of working together than we did in years of studying captured equipment." The former High Empress Vorthagal had been given a small apartment in the reconstructed city, far from the palace where she had once ruled absolutely. She spent her days in a role that would have been unthinkable during the Imperial era, working as a cultural advisor to help human administrators understand Draknari traditions and customs that were worth preserving. The fallen Empress had lost everything that had once defined her identity. Her empire was gone, her authority stripped away, her species now subjects rather than rulers. Yet she found herself oddly grateful for the opportunity to contribute something positive to her people's future. Under human administration, ordinary, Draknari citizens had access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunities that had been denied to them under imperial rule. Commander Zexathera had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all. The former military leader now served as a liaison between human administrators and Draknari communities, using her knowledge of imperial structure to help dismantle the worst aspects of the old system. She had seen firsthand what human warfare could accomplish, but she was also witnessing what human peace could build. "I understand now what Lady Morgana tried to tell me," she admitted to Captain Martinez during one of their regular meetings. "Your species fights not to conquer but to protect. Everything you destroyed during the war, you are now rebuilding better than it was before. This is not the behavior of conquerors. This is the behavior of gardeners." Princess Lyra Lay had been documenting the transformation for the Elven archives, creating a record that future species could study and learn from. Her observations painted a picture of humanity that was both inspiring and terrifying in its implications. "The humans demonstrate a paradox that other species struggle to understand," she wrote. "They are capable of unimaginable destruction when threatened, yet they prefer construction when given the choice. They will burn down empires that oppose them, then spend decades helping the survivors build something better from the ashes." Lady Morgana reviewed her apprentice's work with satisfaction. The young elf was learning the hard lessons of galactic politics, understanding why the Elven Conclave had chosen neutrality over alliance or opposition. Humanity was simply too powerful and too unpredictable to safely categorize as friend or enemy. "The humans offer a choice to every species they encounter," Morgana explained to her apprentice as they prepared to depart Veltharion. "Work with them and benefit from their protection and innovation. Work against them and face the consequences of their displeasure. Ignore them and eventually be forced to choose anyway." The Elven vessel departed former Draknari space carrying reports that would influence Conclave policy for generations to come. The humans had proven themselves to be exactly what Lady Morgana had warned they were: a species capable of both unprecedented destruction and unprecedented construction, depending entirely on how they were treated by others. Captain Martinez stood once again in the ruins of the old Imperial Palace, now bustling with activity as Draknari and human workers collaborated on the final phase of reconstruction. The crystal spires were gone forever, but something better had taken their place. A society based on cooperation rather than domination, mutual benefit rather than exploitation. General Thompson's final assessment had proven accurate. The Draknari Empire was indeed finished, not just as a military threat, but as a concept. The rigid hierarchy that had sustained it for millennia had been replaced by something more flexible and ultimately more durable. The former subjects of the empire were becoming citizens of something new and potentially better. Dr. Rodriguez joined Martinez on the observation deck overlooking the city. "Do you think it will last?" she asked, gesturing toward the busy streets. Below, where former enemies now worked side by side, Martinez considered the question carefully. "As long as we remember why we're here. We're not occupiers trying to extract resources or tribute. We're partners trying to build something that benefits everyone involved. The moment we forget that and start acting like the old empire, we'll deserve whatever happens to us." The transformation of the former Draknari Empire had taken 6 months, but the lessons learned would influence galactic politics for centuries to come. Other species observed the human approach to victory and drew their own conclusions. Some saw opportunity in cooperation, others saw weakness to be exploited. All of them learned that underestimating humanity was a mistake no empire could afford to make twice. Lady Morgana had been right in her warnings to Commander Zexathera. The Draknari Empire had burned, consumed by the fire of their own arrogance. But from those ashes had risen something new, something that offered hope for a galaxy where cooperation might prove stronger than conquest. The humans had demonstrated both their capacity for destruction and their preference for construction. The choice of which face they showed to the galaxy would always belong to those who encountered them. Friendship would be met with friendship. Hostility would be met with annihilation. Indifference would eventually require a choice between the two. The galaxy had been warned through the example of the Draknari Empire. Some species would heed that warning and prosper in partnership with humanity. Others would test it and learn the hard way that certain lessons could only be taught through experience. Captain Martinez watched the sun set over New Veltharion, painting the reconstructed city in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new choices for both humans and their former enemies. But tonight, there was peace, where once there had been war, cooperation, where once there had been domination. The empire had fallen, but something better had taken its place, and that perhaps was the most human thing of all.